Welcome back to Flashpoint with Rich Cardona. My guest is Zach Nadler, who one day wanted to be the GM of the New England Patriots, which makes this funny.
I don't care if you're an alien, you know, like the only Patriot fans are the things that I usually don't invest in. But
Well, Gary Vaynerchuk invested in Zach Nadler because of his extreme talent in representation, so he was hired to be the CEO of VaynerSpeakers. During the course of this interview, Zach walks me through his time in sports management, representing Olympians, and then ultimately working for CAA. Zach had tons of exposure and has a very strong foothold in the speaker representation business. And because of his hustle and his work ethic and his extreme dedication to building relationships, Zach is just like Gary in the fact that authenticity is everything, and he's going to walk us through how he got to where he is today.
No one at 11 years old is thinking they're going to be a speaker's agent. Yep. I've certainly figured that out, quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But I grew up in a small suburban town in western Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. I moved to New York studying sports management. So okay. I came to NYU. I was the kid who, at 12 years old could recite the entire offensive line for the Patriots for every year for, in existence. And mm-hmm. I just kind of ate that stuff up. So I was a passionate sports fan, all the Boston teams. And, I've been this size since 7th grade. So, in 7th grade, it was great. I was, basketball player and whatnot. But that, as I stopped growing, that clearly I wasn't going to be on the Celtics anytime soon. And with this athletic ability, it was even more clear. And so I pursued kind of the business side of sports. I was a passionate guy. If you remember kind of the timing of it, it was Theo Epstein with the Red Sox, in his late 20s. And so it was an opportunity where people were looking at it as kind of the next place to go if you wanted to be in sports. Yep. So my plan was to be the general manager of the Patriots. Right? Clearly that didn't happen. But I came to NYU, studied sports management, and I think it was our first class where one of our professors said, how many of you want to be agents or GMs? And everyone but one kid raised their hand. Yep. No one wound up being a GM, and it was very clear, and he made it that clear that, there are only 30 jobs in most major sports, and most of those are going to former players or people who have been doing this their whole career. So you can certainly do it, but it's not the easiest thing to do. And look at your competition.
Wasn't that deflating though? Like, you are studying this, but like...
Well, it was deflating at the time, but I think he was a great professor, and I think over time, what was nice was everyone learned there's other opportunities. Yep. You're not just bound by, I want to do this, let me do it. Mm-hmm. It's, I want to do this, but I'm not going to be a GM tomorrow, right? How do I get to where I want to go, and how do I pursue other opportunities? So I pursued opportunities in marketing and events and different areas that I didn't really think of at the time. Yep. Now, I didn't want to be an agent, but of course I wound up being an agent. So after school, or even during school, a series of internships, I actually ran celebrity golf tournaments. Oh, wow. So I worked for a small company that had about 10 to 15 events a year, with about 60 celebrities at each event. And at the time, these were the size and scope sometimes bigger than LPGA events. Wow. So I got to learn kind of the events business from the ground up in a small organization where there weren't a ton of people to do every job. Yep. So you had your hands full with different opportunities.
So what did you learn when you went into that? When you go into those kinds of events and high-profile celebrities and all this other stuff, was there anything that turned you on or off and made you realize, I kind of got to pivot? Do you know what I'm saying? Like a rude awakening?
Well, I think working at events, I learned quickly I didn't want to work in events. Yeah. Why? So there's a lot of stresses, and I think, I was young and doing it, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, you asked that question. I think it's something where, it was amazing to me at, 18, 19 years old. I was meeting some of my childhood idols, right? Athletes that, the greatest was when Bo Jackson called and left me a voicemail. I mean, that was kind of the end-all be-all. But, I worked with, Charles Barkley and John Elway and Michael Jordan and all sorts of athletes that I looked up to my entire career. And I got to know a lot of these guys, right? I was going out with Marcus Allen and Eric Dickerson, things that you would have never expected. Yeah. And so as a 19-year-old, that was enormous. But it was also something where I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, ready for the golf tournament that day. Wow. And I could never do it now, but you learn from those experiences because people are relying on you and you're planning and you have everything set up. So I always look at it as I'd have my clipboard for the day, everything's ready to go, 6 o'clock in the morning, we're going to get going. Mm-hmm. By 6:05, everything starts to change.
Of course.
And so there's all sorts of headaches and things you can't anticipate, and you just have to roll with the punches. Mm-hmm. So I look at it as, I learned a lot doing that, but I also apply a lot of that now. Because I just think that every event's gonna have those things that change.
Yep.
I want to be one of those constants, right? If things change on my end, I want to be able to understand and sympathize with the group and be like, we know this is a problem, but let's figure out how to fix it, because they're going to have other problems outside of what I'm doing.
Yep, of course. So when you're 19 and you have like all that responsibility, and maybe you don't realize it at the time how much you're capable of, so probably prepped you, right? Like you still use this stuff now.
Absolutely.
How fast did that help you kind of grow up when you're that young and you are just like gathering all this knowledge and you're just like, holy shit, I'm actually capable of this much? Well,
I think I had a lot of great people teaching me. I don't take that for granted, and I keep in touch with a lot of those individuals from back then. But you learn sometimes the hard way, right? You learn that the mistakes you make, when you're 19, those aren't, we're all still around. It's not the end of the world.
Totally.
But you have to make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes. But I learned so much just being able to do a little bit of everything. When we had a very small company, when we were running events, every event required me to be a different person. I had different responsibilities in Fort Myers than I did in Chicago, than I did in San Diego, and I did in Jamaica. And so every event was a little bit different. It was important to be able to be malleable. To be what you needed to be when you needed to be it, but also showed me so much of what was possible. And working with so many different people, I really understood what I liked and what I didn't like about that space. I used that and kind of propelled from there to become an Olympic agent. And so I was representing Olympians, and it's not on-field stuff. They have membership in the USOC, or they're with USA Swimming and different places like that. And so I had the opportunity to help them pursue their careers by finding sponsorship opportunities and speaking engagements for them.
Wow.
And so that was really where it all came together, but it was because I had an experience. I was like, I like working with athletes. I like working with these guys. I like doing events. And so it was, well, what opportunity could I have? And when I graduated college, it was, I'm not going to be able to go and just suddenly become a sports agent, right? But there was an opportunity that I could right out of the gate be pursuing opportunities from a sales perspective for a lot of these athletes, and that's kind of what I pursued.
So tell me some of the skills that you had to embrace. So like running an event is one thing, right? Like you have a checklist, you have your clipboard, you're going down, it's very operations based, right? And you got to be adaptable and flexible. I'm with that. I'm an operations guy. Well, not anymore, but so then you pivot, and then you're trying to get sponsorship deals, and then now it's kind of like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, you got to start the cold calling maybe, but these are clearly people that are influential. They're not just your typical athlete, right? They're representing the United States in a huge capacity. So what was that like, and what kind of barriers did you run into when you had to change roles?
It was hard. I think going into a sales role anytime, and I implore as many people as possible to get into a sales role, even if you don't think you like it, because, you learn so much from that. And I think from the event side, I learned a lot about time management, about organization, about communication, right? And I find that to be probably the things that I learned the most. In communication, you need to be able to relay information in a way that's effective and efficient. And that still holds true today. And so as I went to a sales role, it was the same idea. You're trying to inform people. You're trying to let them know what they need to know to make a decision, and whatever that decision may be. So if I'm trying to sell them a $1 million sponsorship, what kind of value are they getting back? And if you can't effectively communicate that, you're not going to get anywhere.
Did you ever feel sleazy? Sales has like that negative connotation,
Certainly.
right? So like, did you ever have to adjust yourself in order to sell? And I know that's kind of rhetorical, but where you just kind of felt uncomfortable and you're like, no, like this is what I want my brand to be, and my reputation.
I think the thing that young people should take from it is, sales isn't for everyone, but you learn so much because it's not easy. You have to learn the no, and people will just constantly say no to you, and if you can't deal with that, it puts you in a really tough spot. So you have to harden up a little bit when it comes to it, and I think that you have to be authentic, but you don't always have to be yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
So I think you need to figure out who you're going to be and as a person, and I don't think my personal style, I haven't tried to be someone else on the phone, right? Or when I'm selling. It's just, it doesn't work. You have to be authentic, you have to listen. And I think then if you're honest with people, it's not sleazy.
Yes.
I think it's only sleazy when you try to lie, cheat, skirt deals. When the reality is, if you're just upfront and honest, people appreciate that, and they're more likely to want to buy whatever you're selling if they believe what you're saying and believe you.
Yeah.
And so I think that wholeheartedly. Have I lost deals because of that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can certainly lie to get your way to a deal, but I'm much more interested in a relationship than a deal.
Of course, and that is absolutely. I had a conversation with an author recently about networking, and it's the same thing, right? You get I kind of want this thing from you, Zach, and I'm just going to go in and ask and all this weird shit, and then I'm like, okay, but what if we just have a relationship? What if we start talking about the Patriots? What if we start talking about VaynerSpeakers and all this other stuff? It's a very different story. That means it has a chance, and it's not this weird finite transaction. So you working with the Olympics, I have to ask, did you get to go to an Olympics?
So I didn't go to the Olympics. I worked, I did that from 07 to 09, right around the Beijing Olympics, which was a phenomenal time to be doing it. We worked for a small company, and 2 of my colleagues were in Beijing. I was here in the US and was basically upside down. It was 12-hour time difference. Remember, it was a big deal because it was all live.
Yes.
So I'm up at, watching Jason Lezak complete the relay, which was an amazing event, at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was brutal. But I was here on the ground being a partner for all of our clients, and then one by one they were coming back to the US. We would do our our victory lap with Conan O'Brien and the Today Show. We'd go to the US Open. They would do all their media stuff, their sponsorship opportunities here, and so I was basically on the ground to receive them as they were coming back. I do recall one of my colleagues who went over there wound up in the hospital for most of Beijing's Olympics with dragon flu. So don't know if that would have been me, but certainly it can always be worse.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. So when you're going through like the circuit, so now you have experience with celebrities, so to speak. Well, not so to speak, in reality, with golf tournaments. Now, Olympians, very high profile things. At what point did you, if you even know if it's tangible, like a point where it kind of dropped off a little bit and you were not starstruck and it was just more of responsibility? Because a lot of people think proximity to popularity or power means that, right? But it's not. So like, how was that for you, and did it just become normal?
I think I don't think there's any one time, but I think it happened over time. The reality is, celebrities, I always say, are just like you and me. They just have better stories, right? Like, they're just much more interesting at cocktail parties. And, it really was a slow progression, but, I had a boss when I was doing the golf tournaments who, was great about getting me involved and putting me in front of a lot of the celebrities and trusting that I was capable.
Awesome.
And it helped a lot because I had one-on-one relationships with a lot of these individuals, some of whom I still keep in touch with and work with today. And so it's something where it happens over time, but eventually you do get to that point of no longer being starstruck, just because I think maybe it was something, maybe I was overtired. You just don't have a choice, right? It's no longer like I have the ability to be fawning over you. It's just like, you're just like me, and it's a lot of fun. And when you get treated with the same respect that you show someone, the barriers get broken down. Now, I don't forget, who I'm working with, and I think that's always important too. So even back then, you have to show the respect that people earned, and I think, it was something where, there were some situations I remember, people who I looked up to that maybe other people didn't. You talk about the Patriots. I remember sitting with Pepper Johnson, who was an assistant coach on the Patriots for years, and I would just pepper him with questions, no pun intended. But I would just I was obsessed with it, and he knew that I could talk about football in a meaningful way. We would have these long conversations, and it was just I was just interested, but I just treated him like another guy, and it was fun, and he treated me the same way.
That's awesome.
And situations like that, where at 19, 20 years old, when you're having situations like that, then when you're 24, 25 and growing up, you are used to it. And people rely on you, and they want to have a conversation and not be treated differently per se. They want to be treated, again, with authenticity. You want to approach everyone the same. And I try to approach everyone the same, whether they're a celebrity or not. Because ultimately, A, you never know who someone's going to be tomorrow. But B, it's just, there's no reason not to.
I agree. So you got your operations and time management skills honed. You got your communication, sales skills all together, and then so what happens when you depart from that small firm? And did you seek something out, or were you approached?
So, I did that 07 to 09. And, a lot of what you do with Olympians, right, and especially as it's evolved since probably the 2000 Sydney Olympics, if they're not working at Home Depot, to make money, they're not making a lot of money from USOC, from USA Swimming, from USA Track and Field. These governing bodies, they support their athletes with a variety of ways, but typically not majorly financial. And they, in order to kind of continue training and kind of pursue this after you're, once you're 22, or what happens when you're 30 if you have kids, right? You need to have a source of income. And so a lot of what they do that is speaking engagements, it's clinics, it's sponsorship opportunities. And so I did a lot of that, and as you're pursuing those kind of opportunities, if I do a deal with Coca-Cola for a client this year, if next year they're doing the same event and we had a good relationship, they'll call me and ask me who I can help with. Yeah. Well, if they're not looking for an Olympic client, I wasn't going to just say, good luck.
Yeah, especially like in between Olympics, right? Like
Absolutely.
Year 2, like who?
So, I would try to do deals, for non-clients. And I learned a lot of the speaking business in that way, and I started doing deals with Creative Artists Agency. Okay. And so I wound up transitioning and was brought into CAA early on in their speakers department in 2009. And so it was a natural progression. It expanded on my role. I mean, I still focused on sports when I first started there, but wound up working with their entire client roster, and that was really how that kind of began. I was there 9 years. I learned a lot. I worked with some amazing people from both an agent perspective as well as colleagues and let alone talent. Yep. And it was fascinating to see. I mean, there are a number of deals that I was really proud of, and I worked with some of the biggest stars in the world. But it was something where it was just such a growth opportunity for me to learn the business from the ground up, to really understand the agency world, the large agency world. And it afforded me an opportunity, something like I'm doing now. Yep. Gary was a client when I got to CAA, and that was how we first met. So I didn't know who he was when I started at CAA, right, in 2009. And so we developed a relationship over time, but it was something where we were both growing simultaneously. He was just growing a lot faster and bigger than I was.
Is there a point where you realize, like, I now have established this incredible base or this Rolodex, so to speak, and I could do more with it? Like, was there ever a time where you thought it's time to do my own thing?
It was more like I understood that I was actually being successful and good at this. Yeah. Right? I think it's something where, not to sound arrogant, but you just get to a point where you're like, I think I get it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's like what Malcolm Gladwell says, the 10,000 hours thing. I think I'm at 20,000 hours of doing this, working in the speaking world. So it's something where, you just get to the point where there's a comfort level. I say there's no two deals that are ever the same, and you're still getting surprised by something that happens, but you're less surprised because you've seen similar situations. Got it. So I've slowly but surely kind of understood this, and I think, I don't know when that real moment was, but definitely it was a slow, gradual growth of understanding this business. And I think you never really know everything, but there is a level of expertise where your intuition starts to get honed. And I think that's when it really happens, is when what you anticipate happening happens. It's because you have that knowledge and kind of experience. Like muscle memory, like absolutely. I've seen it. Like this is. I can tell this is what's going to happen. I can't tell you how many times I've disagreed with Gary and he was right. I mean, he won't let me forget that. And I don't mind. I mean, I love being wrong when it's something where I'm wrong, but the right thing works out. Yep. Right. And so, there have been a lot of those situations, but I think it's still going back to the early days of you have to learn from the mistakes, but also anticipate and try and prevent them.